Hi, and welcome to the Pollsters. I'm Margie Omero, Democratic pollster with PSB Research.
And I'm Kristen Soltis-Anderson, Republican pollster with Echelon Insights.
And each week we bring you the polls driving the news in politics, tech, and pop culture. So for folks who missed us when we were in Philly, it was so hard to schedule a time to do an interview. I mean, I basically could not schedule time to talk to myself. It was so insane.
I get these great ideas in my head. Like I was sitting in my hotel room the Sunday night before the convention in Cleveland, and I'm going through my email and I'm looking at like, oh, all of these panels and parties and so-and-so's here and they want to get coffee. And I'm like, oh, I'm going to schedule all this stuff and it's going to be so great. And then like you get going and all of a sudden you realize like, oh, I just RSVP'd for 3 different panels and parties. One that starts at 2:30, one that starts at 3, and one that starts at 3:30.
Yeah.
And they're on like opposite sides of Cleveland. This is not going to happen.
I mean, I made it to 2 parties.
Worse.
It was really hard because everything was in Center City, and then it was kind of far to get to the convention center. And some folks like you and others who were in hotel rooms not in Center City, then you were just out for the day, which just seemed like madness.
Oh, yeah. And it was, look, I was there with ABC. Everybody at ABC was lovely. I was very grateful. They did not wind up using me in Philadelphia because my Democratic counterpart, Donna Brazil, got an unexpected promotion.
Yes.
So I was just sort of hanging out. But even then, like we had a shuttle that would take us back to the hotel, but it ran every like 90 minutes. So I wound up like sitting around at the Xfinity Live grill / CNN grill and like eating and drinking my feelings.
Yes.
Like, I came back. Like I've been detoxing for
That's
the
kind
last,
of how I felt during
6
Cleveland,
days.
but I was just at home in bed eating and drinking my feelings.
I can honestly say it had nothing to do with partisanship. It was just like I am out in a 95-degree, 110% humidity parking lot.
Yeah, it was hard.
I can hang out in a tent and eat hot dogs, or I can hang out here in this restaurant and eat chicken fingers and drink beer.
Right.
It's 3:00 in the afternoon, but it's 5:00 somewhere. Let's go, kids.
No,
so now I'm like, I'm just going to spend the whole weekend eating like kale.
Yes, that's good. Well, I'm a big fan of kale. I didn't eat anything green either the whole week. I ate nothing green. But we did manage to do an excellent Facebook Live, if we do say so ourselves. We had a really cool Facebook Live. That was the one thing I made it to, pretty much, was the Facebook Live with Kristen, just barely. So you should go check it out on our Facebook page. It's pretty cool. It's a whole show. Like, we talk about all the stuff, it's just like a regular show, except we're on Facebook as opposed to...
And you get to see our faces.
And you get to see our faces.
Whether that's a good or a bad thing.
We look okay.
Your mileage may vary. But...
Right. It was like mid-morning, so we were looking like kind of okay and fresh.
It's not melty face
yet.
Yeah,
we weren't like run down yet. So go check it out. But we have all kinds of new polls because politics obviously has kept on going full throttle.
Oh yeah, too many polls.
Then. So what are the top lines?
I don't think this is working. Is it working?
It's working.
It's working. Yes. Bounce, 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 bounce.
Give that production
bounces.
team a raise.
I'm holding up my iPhone up to the mic.
The control room's all high-fiving.
Hi, Kelly. Bounce, 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 bounce. I said I was going to do it last week.
That's right.
And I did it.
And you did it.
Follow the bouncing polls. Trump's bad week is about to get worse as new polls coming out showing Hillary Clinton's bounce was substantial are showing that his chances of making it to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue look pretty bleak at this point. But if you ask voters, many of them would rather have Harambe or a meteor when given the choices that they currently have. How is Trump's nosedive affecting the Senate? We'll take a look at some statewide polls and see how his fortunes are faring compared to those of folks like Kelly Ayotte and Pat Toomey. Finally, we'll dig into whether men are doing a particular thing more than women in the world of academia. What is it? You'll have to listen to find out. And finally, how do we relate to those of different political parties? Pew has some polling out this week about friendship and the 2016 election, and OK Cupid dives into the world of politics and love.
So first, our poll of the week. Is the election getting you down that you feel you need like a brain implant to help you forget all about it? Well, Pew did some research that found, in fact, people are worried about this as well, right? People are obviously worried about the election. People are also worried about things like brain chip implants that would improve cognitive abilities. 2/3 say that they're worried about that. About almost 2/3 say they're worried about synthetic blood to improve physical abilities. And 2/3 are worried about gene editing that gives babies a much reduced disease risk, although people there are a little bit more enthusiastic about it. So this is kind of interesting. Pew poll, there was some real clear dividing lines along religious lines, which I guess is to be expected. And then people were more okay with some of these enhancements if they knew that basically they didn't do anything, that the results would be everybody would be equal, it wouldn't actually improve anything. Then people would be okay with the enhancements, which of course I guess is a little incongruous. I don't know if one of the enhancements for babies would be to prevent them from crying so much at Trump rallies. That would be, maybe that would be an enhancement people would want.
I'm fascinated by the finding that people are actually less okay with this technology if it really, really works. Like you would think, you would think, okay, well, the cost benefit analysis, like the downside is, what if things go squirrely, or what if this is unnatural? But like if it's outweighed by, we're making people really, really healthy. Like, but that's not the calculation that's going on here. That actually people are the most okay with it if it appears
to not do anything.
It doesn't do anything.
Yeah. So anyway, that's pretty interesting. We'll link to it in our show notes. If you're a new listener, hello. We have we link to all this stuff in our show notes, so you can go look at the poll yourself. And this one was at Pew Research about enhancements. So on to 2016. There's been a zillion polls. I mean, you could barely, it's one of those days where, driving in to record this morning, I'm like, oh no, there's more polls coming out from last night that we have to add quickly before we get there. I mean, there's just a billion polls out, and they all ultimately tell the same story. There was a Trump bounce after Cleveland, completely wiped out by the Clinton bounce after Philly. The question is how much of that bounce is now being propelled or magnified by Trump's erratic, at best, behavior over the last few days. Now the Huffington Post average shows a 7-point advantage for Clinton in the two-way. If you have a three-way with Johnson, you still basically, you have a 5-6 point, advantage, but it's still a clear advantage for Clinton. What do you make of this bounce when you look at all of the coverage of the bounce?
Well, I think a lot of Trump's bounce had originally come from people who were Republicans who were kind of unsure about him, sort of coming around that the convention was this nice, like, let's all be friends and rally and unify. And obviously in the last couple of days, that has been majorly torpedoed with a variety of Republican leaders and Trump sort of getting into disputes with one another. And, when you take a look, I think Gallup has asked this question going back decades, based on what you saw or read about a party's convention, are you more or less likely to vote for that candidate? And look, convention bounces, or at least the percentage of people saying they're more likely to vote for a candidate post-convention has shrunk significantly in recent elections anyways. Back in 1988, the Democratic convention, supposedly there was a plus 35, more likely to less likely difference in that election. And ultimately the Democrats did not win that presidential election. George H.W. Bush did. So it doesn't necessarily predict how big a convention bounce will be or how long it will sustain or who will win the election. But it is notable that I think for the first time since 1984, the Gallup has done this. They found that a majority of people said that the convention made them less likely to support a party's nominee when it came to the Republican convention.
Oops. I mean, that is quite troubling. I mean, the question is how much of this stuff is people just saying what they already think.
I already didn't like Trump.
Yeah, I didn't like Trump, right?
I don't like him anyways.
Right. I mean, PSB Research, we did a dial online poll after Philly, where we showed people clips of speeches online, and they could use a little slider to say how they felt about it, so they get a continuous rating, plus then a couple questions after the various speech clips. And then we did it again after Philly. We'll link to all this stuff in the show notes, and we talked about it in the Facebook Live. And so there you can see people move without saying, in addition to asking them, did this make you move? You can actually see if people move. And there was in fact equal movement for Trump over the course of watching 4 clips after Cleveland as there was after Philly. There was a 3-point move for each candidate after watching each set of clips after those conventions. So, so there are people who were actually responding well to the Trump clips. I think the coverage is so insane that just, and he steps over all his own best material that people don't get to see, Trump making a coherent argument, which he did, I guess. You can disagree with it, but it was at least more coherent than he usually is. Or Pence's speech, which got completely drowned out by Cruz. After Philly, we tested, for example, Michael Bloomberg's speech, which was a very clear effort to extend a hand to Republicans, and that, in fact, was quite successful. It didn't have as high peaks among Democrats as some of the other speeches, but it did much better with Republicans and independents than some of the other speeches. So again, people were responding the way that the speech is intended to. It's the coverage that maybe takes all this stuff into a different direction.
So, Donald Trump made a big deal about the fact that even though I think average ratings for the Republican convention were lower, I mean, frankly, we just had far less star power at ours than the Democrats, that the final night speech, his versus Hillary Clinton's, he had slightly better ratings. But some other polling from Gallup suggests that might also not have been a great thing, that on average, if you look at those saying that his speech was excellent or good, and then you subtract those who say that the speech was poor or terrible, the net margin, Donald Trump's speech was in net negative territory, just by a little bit, whereas Hillary Clinton had a margin of over plus 20 if you subtract the bad from the good. So
what about the ratings? What
about the ratings? So, Donald Trump may have had a very slight bounce from his convention, but it has largely been washed out. But people still are not really excited about their choices. So we took a look. There are a couple polls that have come out. Fox News did a poll that, by the way, showed Donald Trump in really bad territory. I think down by about 10.
10, yeah.
I mean, really, really big. I tried looking back at the 2012 polls and only found one poll where Mitt Romney was down by 10 compared to Obama. And this was like really early. It was like May. It was like much earlier in the process. It certainly was not post-convention. And in this poll, they asked respondents, will your vote for president be more about being for my candidate or against the opponent? And they found that for Clinton supporters, 49% of Clinton supporters say, it's mostly more for my candidate, but 47% say it's mostly against Trump. And then for Trump supporters, it was 52% saying that their support for Trump is actually mostly because they oppose Clinton. So what's depressing about this is then I looked at the exit polls and I went back to the 2012 ones because they ask this question: is your vote for your presidential candidate more about I strongly favor my candidate, I have some reservations about them, or it's mostly because I dislike the opponent? And in the exit polls, only 10% said their vote was mostly about disliking their opponent.
I don't think we're going to see that this time.
No. From 10% up to, at a minimum, 47, maximum 52. I mean, that's wow.
Yeah.
So this is a very sad election. And that's why when public policy polling asked people, who would you rather choose? Would you rather have Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, or they call it the giant meteor for president movement. I know it affectionately as SMOD 2016
yeah, exactly.
at Sweet Meteor Odeth. You can buy T-shirts that say SMOD 2016.
Just ended already? Isn't that what is?
Just ended already?
I'm saying it's a he. I'm assuming it's a he.
Yeah, that's true. Could be a woman. Could be a female meteor. When I was tweeting back during the Republican convention, I tweeted something like, Ted Cruz is taking this gamble, attacking Donald Trump because he's playing the long game. And SMOD responded to me and said, I'm not. Or somebody responded and was like, SMOD's not. Sweet Meteor Odeth is not playing the long game.
I mean, in fact, SMOD is doing better than Gary Johnson. And Gary Johnson is doing not badly. I mean, considering that some polls show him up in double digits. We've shown that, in our work, there's been some polling, but, the average of Huffington Post is in single digits. But PPP had a poll that showed SMOD to be doing better, in fact, than Johnson, and 13%, far more support than the third party candidates actually on the ballot, particularly appealing to independent voters. But the other piece of, and this was from a month ago, so we don't know how SMOD is doing now after the conventions. But they also tested Harambe, the gorilla, which I think is, and this was recent, and I think maybe the Harambe's moment to be included in a PPP poll is probably gone. Although I should just say, as a digression for a minute, if you ever read McSweeney's, they had, like, before the Republican convention, they had, the official list of speakers of the Republican convention, because remember, Trump wasn't really releasing them because they were just, he hadn't figured out who they were. And one of them was, we're going to bring back to life Cecil the gorilla and Harambe and make them fight. That was
Cecil versus Harambe?
That was going to be one of the speakers of the Republican convention, which I found kind of and I say this as someone who really loves animals and loves going on safari. I just found that particularly
in the three-way ballot test between Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump, and Harambe. Hillary Clinton 48, Donald Trump 43, Harambe 5. Harambe has a net unfavorable.
Even there are people voting for candidates who are net unfavorable. Like, for example, Harambe. Harambe is also the name of the reggae nursery rhyme music class my daughter used to go to. It's called Harambe. It means like coming together or something like that. So it's super fun for folks who live in Columbia Heights. I'm sure and have kids. Everybody who has kids who lives in Columbia Heights knows about Harambe. Nobody else outside of that does. But
now we all know Harambe the gorilla.
Yep. Baba Ross. Yep. Singing a Harambe song. So anyway, so that's, this is what people are resorting to in order to make sense of the election. I mean, I got to tell you, I was on the floor. I was literally on the floor watching Clinton's speech, and I thought it was one of the best speeches that she'd given. It could be because I was right there as opposed to watching at home while, like, making dinner or whatever. But she was warm. She was, in the moment, she was loose. She covered all the territory. And, as I mentioned on the Facebook Live, like, I got into an accident. I had, like, a lot of issues with my leg. So I was, like, getting really kind of wobbly after Dr. Barber, who I had never heard of before. Dr. Barber was this preacher who spoke a couple things before Clinton, and I was like, oh, this is what I imagine like a tent revival is like, where I'm like, I believe I'm gonna pass out, and, like, just carry me out of here. Like, I totally get it. Like, whatever I learned about tent revivals from movies, like, that's how I felt. Like, I was just gonna, get swept away, and I could see how you could think like, oh, this is a good way to spend a Saturday, to just sort of like, pass out in a room full of strangers. That was how I felt during the last night of the convention. So it's not a surprise to me that the polling shows that people respond better to her speech than to Trump's.
But look, we can talk about national polls all day long, but at the end of the day, there is no national election. There are only statewide elections.
Yes.
A lot of different statewide elections that will choose electoral votes for Donald Trump, for Hillary Clinton, for SMOD. Or for Gary Johnson.
For the Philly fanatic.
When you look at the statewide polling averages headed into the convention, Donald Trump was in rough shape. My column at the Washington Examiner this week is all about, it came out on Wednesday before a lot of these post-convention statewide polls came out, but where I was basically making the case that in order for Donald Trump to win, he has to start with Mitt Romney's electoral college map, and then he has to add 64 states or 64 electoral votes worth of states and not lose anything that Mitt Romney already had. So the upshot has helpfully put together a little chart with what the polling averages looked like before the conventions. And you had a state like North Carolina where you had Clinton on average up by 2.4. And bear in mind, in North Carolina, a court ruling just struck down their voter ID laws there. And what we know from sort of academic research is that in places where these voter ID law debates have been really prominent, it actually increases African-American turnout. Even if the laws are in place, it increases African-American turnout. So North Carolina, already a state that was not looking good for Republicans to hold. You've also got states like Ohio, which was kind of a coin flip. For ABC's This Week, I had to make a map of what I thought the election would look like if the election had been held on Sunday, which is post-conventions, but sort of, it was just the beginning of the Trump meltdown. Like, Sunday was the day that the interview aired where he
Right.
said, like, oh, Putin's not in Crimea. Wait, no, but I mean, he is. But, like, they want to be there. Wait, huh?
But if I was there, then
if I was there, it'd be great. It'd be great. So in that one, I wound up coming up with Hillary Clinton 323, Donald Trump 215, obviously making Hillary Clinton president by a long shot. In that, I was kind to Trump, and I gave him Iowa and Ohio. Because a lot of the Iowa polls had been showing, I mean, they have Clinton up.
And Arizona, which, could be in play, frankly.
And so I gave him Arizona as well. Arizona could also be in play. But again, this was if the election had been held on Sunday.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing fresh polls come out that have been conducted since Sunday that are really beginning to solidify just how impossible it looks right now for Donald Trump to pull off this whole, I'm going to win all of, I did not give him Pennsylvania. I did not give him Michigan.
No.
I did not give him Wisconsin.
Nope.
Some other folks were suggesting, maybe he can pull off. Those are those blue collar states. Polling out today suggests not a chance. Franklin and Marshall's poll of Pennsylvania shows Clinton up by 11. Detroit News WDIV poll in Michigan shows Clinton up by 9. New Hampshire poll by our friends at WBUR and Mass Inc. Clinton up by 17 in the two-way ballot test. And then when you do the four-way, where you include Johnson and Stein, it's Clinton up 15.
Wow.
New Hampshire is one of those states that is sometimes considered a swing state.
Yep.
It's gone red in recent years. It's not part of the blue wall. And prior to the conventions, the polling average had Clinton up by 1.2. We always say don't panic about any one individual poll. Look at polling averages. But plus 15, that's something.
Right. And it's a state, too, that could be in play because it went solidly for Bernie Sanders. Now, of course, he's from neighboring Vermont, but still,
right. Was there any chance that the depressed Bernie folks would say, nah, for Clinton? No. And the real implication here is if all of a sudden, Trump is down by 10 in these national polls, if he's really losing these states by double-digit margins, what's it going to do down ballot? I did a segment on Fox News 2 or 3 days ago discussing with Matt Schlapp from the ACU, who was sort of trying to make the case that no, Donald Trump in some of these blue states he's like, I'm looking at polling that says that this isn't actually a drag on these candidates.
And we had Whit Ayers on, and he said that we're seeing a lot more split ticket voting. So I think, there's an effort to try and figure out how do you make this happen?
If you look at so Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania is one of the Republican incumbents who is considered in danger, as is Kelly Ayotte, the Republican senator from New Hampshire. And the polls that have come out today suggest that even though they are polling well ahead of where Donald Trump is, if Donald Trump is losing their state by double digits, it's not enough. So in the Franklin and Marshall poll, Donald Trump is down by 11. Pat Toomey is only down by 1 among likely voters. That's a 10-point advantage over the top of the ticket. And yet, because the top of the ticket is doing so badly, Pat Toomey can't overcome it. Similarly, in New Hampshire, again, Clinton is up by 15. Kelly Ayotte, they have down only by 10. So it's not as big of a gap, but she's polling about 5 points better than Trump. So if Trump's only losing the state by 2 or 3, Trump can lose, but Kelly Ayotte still gets elected. Right. But if Trump's losing the state by 15, that is way too big a wave for her to overcome.
Right. And and the other, and also, so a few things on this. One, there's been some analysis, I think 538 did it, showing a very high correlation between Senate votes and presidential votes, less so with gubernatorial races. One, because they're sometimes in different kinds of years, not necessarily presidential
different
years.
Issue sets.
Different issues, and you kind of see and feel the governor more, while Senate is part of Washington, so you can see how that's more aligned with presidential votes. So it's very difficult when a wave hits, having worked with Democratic candidates, when a wave is both in your favor and not in your favor, been there both kinds of years, there ain't much you can do. You're like, you have to come up with 3 things you disagree with the presidential candidate that people don't like, or you have to just put that person in all of your ads and hope that that's enough. Like that's all you need to say is that you're with the team that's getting a wave that year. And that's all you can do. It's very, very hard to bust out in some of these races. And that's why you see folks like Congressman Charlie Dent from Pennsylvania kind of came out today or yesterday to say that he was not voting for Trump. Now, he's always been one of the most moderate members of Congress. So it's not really a surprise. I mean, some of the folks, the Republican members you've seen now in the last few days saying, I'm not with Trump. Like Richard Hanna, who I think is not even running for re-election, is a little
Adam
bit easier.
Kinzinger, who's one of the sort of rising stars in the party.
And I don't know what his district is like. If it's a targeted district, it might be, right?
I think he's somewhat safe, but he's certainly been more of a, he was like a Jeb guy. The party needs to adapt and evolve guy.
Right. So, I mean, here's the challenge with some of these folks, right? If they want to withstand this terrible wave, right, then they have to be clear in how they're going to, what they're saying about Trump. They have to, I think they have to be clear. They can't simply say, what Kelly Ayotte's been saying, okay, I'm not endorsing them, but I'm not endorsing him, but I'm voting for him, I think is what she said, something like that, which to me just seems like just mealy-mouthed. And, it's the same thing with Paul Ryan. And it's with all these folks. Like, you can criticize them, if you're criticizing him all day long and then you're still voting for him, but you're not endorsing him, like, I'm sorry, that just doesn't seem like a very strong leadership move. How is it possible that somebody who says all these things that you think are horrible is better qualified to be president? Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
I would say of all the people on the right who came out and endorsed Trump, and it kind of surprised me, Paul Ryan's the one that I'm still the most sympathetic to his plight, because he's got this caucus he's got to keep happy. And he knows that while he's got some folks in his caucus who are in these bubble districts where Trump's not going to be very popular, he's also got a lot of members who are in districts where they either need to survive a primary, and he doesn't want to put them in an awkward position of, okay, do you have to, I think he wants to be as create as few problems as possible for his caucus.
Yeah.
But then I was kind of laughing because after Donald Trump trolled him,
right,
which A+ troll game, Donald Trump.
No, that was quite good.
I don't think I'm quite ready to endorse Paul Ryan. Like, oh gosh, there were all these other commentators saying, well, this gives Paul Ryan cover to walk away. But I feel like if you're walking away from Donald Trump, not because of the other stuff he said,
right,
but because he won't endorse you,
right,
that feels kind of weird to me.
I mean, that's the thing I find so obnoxious. Like, oh, how dare he go after all this, like pearl clutching and smelling over the fact that he, was mean to poor Paul Ryan, as opposed to all the other people in the world that he's been mean to, from babies to grieving mothers.
Yeah,
like,
I've just
can't
been.
even take it.
Look, listeners to the show know we are a bipartisan show. I am letting down my side of the bargain here by being just vocally not interested in my party's nominee at all.
And I've got real Trump rage right now.
Yeah, Margie's got real Trump rage.
I've got real rage.
I'm still trying to do my best to, look at the data through a clear lens. But I have been so amused at the last 48 hours of all these folks who were like, oh my gosh, Donald Trump has just gone out of bounds. I'm like, he started his campaign insulting Senator John McCain for being captured as a POW.
I know.
Like, where were y'all a year ago?
I know. I just find these crocodile tears incredible. I mean, so there's going to be this, intervention, right? Like, what
some people are saying the intervention's not going to happen. It is amusing to me that now Newt Gingrich is out giving far more critical interviews of Donald Trump than he was in the past. Chris Christie was reportedly not going to participate in the intervention, if the intervention was actually a real thing, because he's still got anguish over not being the Veep. And last but not least, you had, I believe, Sean Hannity last night came out and was like, Trump kind of needs to get it together. Like, when you've lost Sean Hannity, Trump,
you're a man on an island.
Oh noes. So anyhow, this race has gotten real crazy. I am very excited for next week to see polling where everything is settled in a little more. Because we could still, let's be honest, these polls that were taken of these states, this is still in Clinton campaign bump territory.
Yep.
So these numbers, while they look really scary, they could come down.
And we shouldn't assume that every voter out there taking these polls has heard about, Trump's tweet to try and clean up the mess on Crimea. We should just assume they haven't.
Right. The Fox poll, I think, did ask people, have you heard about the controversy over the cons and, what Trump said about the Gold Star family. And a very high percentage of people said, yes, they had heard of it. And yes, they thought that his response was bad, even a high percentage of Republicans.
Yeah. Wasn't there a majority that said, yes, they agreed with the statement that Trump sacrificed no one and nothing? I think.
Or, there was.
Sorry, sorry,
wasn't...
Pollster, if I just made that up out of
the results just weren't great for him.
No.
So nonetheless.
And also it goes to this thing, not that we need to beat up on Trump more, but why not? I mean, it goes to this thing where he's blaming the media. He's blaming the media as the source of all these problems. Like, why is the media doing this to me? I was on CNN and I got into my thing, I don't really like to get into screamy fights on TV. Why? Like, it just doesn't really seem that that's worth anybody's time. But I just can't I've got such Trump rage. And so when a Trump surrogate on CNN said, well, this panel is just me versus four talking about, Trump statements on the Khan family, I just couldn't take it anymore. I was like, so you're mad that it's not 50% of people who agree with attacking a grieving mother? That's what you think the representation should be? That's not actually the world right now. Like, even 25% seems a little high to me. So I'm glad to see Fox News, that other liberal bastion, confirm it. Anyway, so that's what's going on out in the world of people talking about Trump. It's just complete chaos. Like, if you have anything else going on. I mean, that's the other thing that's pretty crazy about this is like there's this convention bounce, but we're not even talking about anything about the convention. I mean, nobody can get any word in edgewise about anything other than whatever Trump belched out in the last half hour. I mean, whether it's the Clinton campaign and, they're good or bad that's coming out of the Clinton campaign. None of it is getting any airtime. It is just like all Trump all the time. It's incredible. It's what an incredible thing to watch.
Well, I think maybe before we move on to the story about men and women and academia, let's talk very briefly about
which is exciting.
The way that 2016 and friendship.
Yes.
And then we can come back at the end to the dating. To love. 2016 and
right.
Love. So 2016 and friendship. This is really I'm not engaging in Facebook discussions over this stuff. I am actively trying to not respond to family members and friends who I love who have hopped on the Trump train
yes.
and really want to kind of argue with me about I saw your tweet. And I'm like,
started no good sentence ever.
Nope. We're going to end that conversation right now.
I saw somebody I really, one of the podcasts I listen to a lot, she tweeted out I am doing a Marie Kondo on my friend list and counting out everybody who supports Trump. I'm like, yes, that ties it all together nicely for me.
Well, it looks like, according to Pew, a lot of people, even if they were to engage in such a Marie Kondoing of their friends based on 2016 preferences, wouldn't have that many people to cut. So Pew asked people, registered voters, what percentage of your close friends support the same candidate as you? Among Trump supporters, 44% say a lot of their friends support Trump. 38% say some of their friends support Trump. Only about 16% say just a few or none of their friends support Trump. So only 16% are I'm the only Trump friend in my group.
Yeah.
Among Clinton supporters, you have 41% saying a lot of their friends are also voting for Clinton. 40% saying some. You only have 17% who are I'm the lone Clinton supporter in my group of friends.
Right.
So people have really clustered into these groups where most of the people they know and talk to agree with them. They asked, what percentage of you do not have any close friends who support the other candidate? For Trump supporters, only about a third say they don't have any close friends that support Clinton. But among Clinton supporters, it's almost half. Almost half of people who support Hillary Clinton are I don't have a close relationship with, I can't fathom anybody that I'm close to liking Trump.
Yeah. I know. I mean,
we are a nation divided.
I know. And there's been a lot of polling on this kind of concept, and Pew's done it, and other folks have done it. The sort of big sort that we've now sort of grouped ourselves into friendship circles or communities where you simply don't have to encounter anyone from any other kind of tribe, whether that's party or something else. And it's a problem because it makes a difference. I mean, it certainly helps here in Washington to make friends who are people who are on the other side. People talk about that. It seems kind of hokey, but it does make a difference.
Hey, it's working out great for this show.
I know, right? That's right. That's our secret to rocketing up to the top of the charts and dethroning Milo from whatever. awesome. Don't tweet us.
Don't even say his name. Don't. Oh my God.
It's like Beetlejuice. So it is kind of disturbing. There was a New York Times video that did a compilation of Trump rallies where people were like shouting out real racist slurs. There was a Washington Post Monkey Cage blog study that showed that people who, this is for the primary, so it's a little bit different, but that Trump voters compared to McCain and Romney voters had more extreme views on race or against immigrants or against Muslims. And I think it's of a piece with this not knowing people sort of outside your typical dynamic. And it's true, though, for Clinton voters as well as for Trump voters, not the race piece, but the, not having friends who are of another, type of social dynamic. It really makes a difference to sort of figuring out what people are thinking, which is what our job is as pollsters. But it's just another bit of sad news. So we'll move on to sad news, but that's also funny. That was very popular on Facebook this week, and that's men saying, I know what I'm talking about. I'm a dude. I'm an expert.
And let's just say for the record, we here at the Pollsters, we love our men.
That's right.
Men are great.
That's right.
We're not anti-man, even though we often come to the show armed with great polling data that makes us giggle about you guys.
You may indeed be an expert, but it turns out that according to this academic study, men self-cite themselves in journal articles 70% more than women, and that was true across major academic fields. So when you write a lit review and you write an academic article, you have to say, well, the literature shows blah, blah, blah. It's all leading up to this great point I'm going to make in this article. And so your lit review kind of delves into that. And men are more likely to cite their own studies as, pointing to the background that's relevant to that article more than women do, which I find fascinating. I guess it maybe is because maybe if men have written more or something, I don't know, but it just seems quite incredible. If men and women cited themselves at equal rates, okay, no, I can't read this is too jargony, this whole chart, but it is a really massive difference here. Men publish more, men face fewer penalties with self-promotion. And does this lead to women's underrepresentation in fields? Because if you look at number of journal sites or to the extent you contribute to the literature, if men are in there more because they're, juking the stats by talking about themselves, is that problematic for women? I don't know. But it is consistent with a study I've seen. I think it was in one of the books written by Claire Shipman and Katie Kay about one of the differences between men and women in their job, whether their income or some sort of performance at work, was not actual performance, but who told their boss more about what they were up to.
Interesting. So bragging matters.
That's right.
Bragging matters.
Otherwise, people aren't going to know what you're up to.
Yep. Lean in. Brag out.
That's right. You don't need to stay
Talk
late.
About how great you are, ladies.
Yeah, that doesn't take that much time, talking about how great you are.
And then,
take it from us.
Gallup has consistently, for the last, 3 decades, asked whether or not people in the country feel that women have equal job opportunities as men. So back in 1987, it was less than half said yes to this question. And I'm sort of laughing as I'm looking at this chart because it shows that the answer for U.S. adults overall matches the results for men, but then women are like significantly below it. Did we just find a chart error here?
Oh, yeah, maybe.
That doesn't make any sense
unless
there's like some huge group of respondents who
will have to email
did not
Frank Newport, or maybe somebody who works for Frank Newport.
But nonetheless, by the time, when you get to sort of the 2007, 2008 era, you see that there's been a big uptick in the percentage of people who think, yes, women in this country do have equal job opportunities. But that uptick has been much larger among men than among women. So men sort of thinking all is well, women less so.
Right.
That improvement among men has now sort of come back down to earth, where you have 61% of men and 43% of women saying that they feel that women in this country have equal job opportunities as men.
Yeah, we'll see if Hillary Clinton gets elected. Do these numbers change? We don't know. We'll see. Mm-hmm. It's interesting that they've fallen from 2008. I don't know what explains that necessarily. But here, and there wasn't anything between 2008 and now, so we don't know how that bounced around. But what I thought was particularly interesting was they also asked this question: do you generally favor or oppose affirmative action programs for women? And the phrase affirmative action I mean, I guess they've been asking it for a while, so they haven't changed it. It's one of those anachronisms, but it's not, it never does well. If you said, should, all things being equal, women be given more, more chance, more opportunities so they can, improve their representation and work or something like that, like some question that kind of explains affirmative action without calling it affirmative action, I'm sure you would have gotten higher numbers. But even phrased this way, a majority say yes, and that number's been increasing. 60% say yes.
A majority among men and women.
Yeah, majority of men and women. 55% men, 64% of women. I find that really hard to believe.
The change hasn't been that dramatic from 2005 to now, but I think it's fascinating. I actually am the most surprised that it has stayed where it is. And actually, the only group on here where I can see a real decline in support for it was among Hispanic respondents, where you had 76% in 2005 saying that they favored, and that fell to 69%, but that's still a pretty high number.
Right. I'm frankly, I don't often like drop my jaw at poll results. Like usually I'm like, right, that sounds about right. But this I found quite surprising.
In part because the term affirmative action is one of those words that pushes people into partisan camps, right? So you would assume that,
like, it's just a shy of quotas. It's not quite as bad as quotas, which people don't use anymore in questions, but it does kind of ring that same
you
bell.
Can get a majority of people, 60% of people, to support it when you're using a term that is so off-putting to a large partisan group is pretty astonishing.
Yeah. So anyway, that's some interesting news.
Last but not least, let's talk about this OK Cupid stuff.
Okay, I've been trying to get this in the show for weeks, but just hasn't made it for a variety of reasons. And some of it is not safe for our clean rating. So we're just going to talk about some of the clean stuff. If you want to really get in the nitty gritty.
We have to talk about museums, yoga, and crying.
Yes, we have to. Yes, that's why that's in there. So OK Cupid did this analysis. So they had two different axes. They had Republican and Democrat, and they also had, are you looking for love or are you looking for sex? And then they mapped all these different words that were in your profile to see what kinds of things predicted. Are you a Republican looking for love? Are you a Republican looking for sex? Are you a Democrat looking for love? Are you a Democrat looking for sex? And some of the things were predictable. Like if you said that you were 420 friendly, you were going to be a Democrat than a Republican. If you like Broad City, you're a Democrat. If you like Clint Eastwood, you're a Republican. So some of those things are like, okay, right, that makes sense. But then some other things were pretty funny, like if you say the activities that you like. So for conservatives, it's going to the shooting range or being outside. For liberals, it's museums, yoga, and crying.
I'm going to continue smiling about this forever.
I mean, people, don't put crying in your OK Cupid, for crying out loud. I mean, I'm sorry. Like, it's okay to cry, but it's not okay to put crying in your OK Cupid profile. Can we agree on just a few things?
There was somebody, a friend of mine posted a tweet that said, these things do not equal a personality, and then listed a bunch of things, and they were craft beer, Hamilton, Harry Potter, travel, something else. And I was like, they're just listing all the things I like. So I tweeted, like, I'm going to have to go back to the personality store, since obviously liking Harry Potter and Hamilton and craft beer and travel does not constitute a personality.
No.
I mean, I get what they're saying.
Yes.
That these are
right. You don't know what it's going to be like, right.
When
you get that 3 a.m. call from your partner.
When the red phone rings.
Like, but I love Hamilton. How can I use that right now? No, it's not actually relevant.
I am not throwing away my shot. Anyhow, by the way, if you are a listener and you are a Hamilton fan, I highly suggest go look up my friend Mary Catherine Ham. She's a CNN commentator, and during the course of the Republican convention, she snuck in 11 different Hamilton lyrics into her segments.
Oh my God, that is incredible.
So if you're just watching, you would never have noticed her saying,
what can't that gal do?
I was like, well, she told me halfway through the week, like, that what was happening. And so me and a group of friends, like, we'd all go get margaritas and, like, help cook up, like, okay.
That's good.
Ted Cruz, he's willing to wait for it. Like, that doesn't sound like you're quoting a song.
Right.
But if you know Hamilton, like, you get that that's a reference.
That's good.
So now I'm like, man, she's really raised the stakes. Now I have to think, can I pull this off? Can I like do a week of just like dropping Game of Thrones references subtly in all my TV hits? I think that's harder though. The Hamilton one, that was pretty strong. And it was
like
11
weird
of them too.
Like it's not really quite in English. So the Game of Thrones, like you just every 4 words there's like what is that?
How many times can I drop like winter's coming?
Right.
Yeah. So anyhow, if you're a Hamilton fan, check it out. She's a rock star.
Well, speaking of raising the stakes, stakes are things that Republicans who are looking for love want. And Dr. Pepper, steak for Republicans means you're looking for sex. Dr. Pepper is for Republicans looking for love.
Dr. Pepper?
I don't understand. I don't understand that. Maybe it's because I'm not a Republican. But avocados and vegetarians are for lefties who want love, which I do understand. That makes a lot of sense to me. And I love avocados. And we have constant avocados. Beckett must be looking for love because he just loves avocados with all his heart. It's just one of his favorite little things. And if you mention a weapon, don't mention a weapon in your OK Cupid profile either. Crying or weapons, like don't.
No, but for conservatives, going to the shooting range is a thing they like to do.
Yeah, well, going to a shooting range is fun, but talking about weapons doesn't. I don't know. I guess that's. I wouldn't like that person on OK Cupid. I'd be like, no, that's
not a match.
Not for sex or love. I'm sorry, that's doesn't do it for me. But anyway, go check it out. It will link to it. It's pretty entertaining. You can spend quite a few minutes looking at that. So our key findings: the race is officially crazy. You thought it was just the polls. It is now actually just the race. Men are experts. Just ask them. And there aren't many places where Democrats and Republicans can hang out. Not in person. Not on OK Cupid, pretty much just the pollsters.
You can find us at the Pollsters on Twitter or individually at Margie O'Maro and at Kaysoltis Anderson. We're at www.thepollsters.com, where we'll post our show notes, links to all of the polls that we've talked about today. You can also follow us on Facebook, where we post not only links to stories we might talk about in upcoming shows, but also we're going to try to do more of those Facebook Live videos. So make sure that you've liked our page so that it can pop up in your feed when we go live to do our show. Make sure you've subscribed to us, iTunes, Stitcher, whatever your favorite podcatcher is. Thanks to those of you who are writing reviews, and we'll look forward to seeing you all next week.
Bye. Thanks.